this series of conversations at the edge. Now, for this episode, we have two wonderful trailblazers in their own field. Ramona, who is the COO at the World Agricultural Forum. She formerly was at GDN, and it's based in Romania. Her background is in global research, networks, and capacity building in social sciences. And she also runs a blueberry farm, grounding her perspective in agriculture and practice. Bernard, who I've known for some time now, is based in South Africa, and he's a researcher at the Forestry and Agricultural Biotechnology Institute, FABI, University of Pretoria. And he works on microbes and insect genetics with a strong inter and transdisciplinary approach. He also is deeply involved in Future Africa and the Africa Science Leadership Program, of which I'm an alumni. And he is really keen on connecting large African and global networks together. Today, we are going to be joining our conversation at the edge, where they share their experiences on collaboration and how to work across boundaries, not really on what to fix what is broken, but rather to appreciate what works and how to foster what works. So with that, I'm going to set the ball rolling. For our participants in the chat, you'd also see a similar question and would like to invite you to also put your thoughts on what you think about collaboration and what it means to you. And with that, I'm going to pose a question first to Ramona and ask, what does collaboration really mean to you, and how involved are you with collaboration within your domain?
Thank you so much, and very nice to be part of this conversation. I've generally enjoyed conversations with people that come from different domains and different walks of life, different sectors and different regions. And this is a forum that actually forces us to reflect on the value of that per se. So thank you again. Now, coming to your question, in agriculture in particular, I think it's important for us to remember that while for a long time we referred to agriculture as a sector, it's a very interconnected sector. It's related to climate change, right? There are dual interactions. The climate affects agriculture. And as we have droughts and floods and increasing temperatures, farmers need to adapt. And vice versa, right? It's one of the largest contributors of greenhouse gas emissions, and it's impacting climate change, our environment, biodiversity, water, and so on and so forth. It's related to poverty. It's related to health and nutrition. It's related to gender, right? Women make up almost half of the labor force in agriculture, in some parts of the world even more, 70%. Yet they own less than 15% of the land, and there are many, many issues there to look at. So gender aspects, livelihoods, poverty, inequality, it's one of the most unequal sort of sectors. So it's really very interconnected. And that by itself kind of asks for collaboration and adopting a more coherent and intersectoral approach. In fact, more recently, you may have heard the global discourse has moved from even referring to agriculture to referring to food systems. So we're not looking at a sector, we're looking at a system. And a system that has many parts and many moving parts. There are many actors along the value chain, right? We have the farmers, we have the processors, we have the traders, we have wholesalers, we have retailers, we have us as consumers, and we want to have good food and nutritious food on the table. We have funders and international organizations. And it also needs researchers and academics to sort of work together and contribute with policymakers, with civil society organizations who help actually implement programs on the ground and reach farmers, with the private sector, absolutely, and with international organizations. So it's a very, very complex system. It's also one in which we're not always moving forward. Hunger is on the rise, for example. It's one of the few SDGs where we're going backwards, losing progress that we had made. So we absolutely need more collaboration, breaking down silos, and more coherence. So I'm sure Bernard will sort of add to that, and I can come in later with more specifics and examples and things like that. But yeah, it's a complex animal, and I think without collaboration, we're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah, I totally
Yeah.
agree. And Bernard, what do you think?
Yeah, I can just link to what Ramona is saying. Absolutely, an integrated system. I think that's one of the main reasons why we are recognizing more and more how important collaboration is. I mean, we've spoken about and have participated in collaboration and collaborative networks for a very, very long time. But I think the urgency in strengthening those networks and working in collaborative networks is becoming increasingly recognized as people recognize the interconnectedness of systems. You know, the agri-food systems, Ramona, that you're talking about. I also work a lot in forestry. That is as connected to agriculture. Well, a lot of agriculture is also trees, but also when we are producing wood and fiber products from them, those are really connected also to our agricultural systems, to our environmental systems. They're connected across borders and across continents. There's just no way that you can look at the future of ensuring the health and the productivity of our forestry sector, for example, or an agri-food system, if you're looking at this in isolation, either regionally isolated, you're looking just in your country or whatever, or from a sector perspective. And I think the urgency, in terms of that, is increasingly clear to all of us. As you say, we're moving backwards with things like hunger,
Yeah.
for example. But I think in many environmental measures as well, for me working in forestry, many forests around the world are threatened, more so than they were 10 and 20 and 30 years ago, despite increasing knowledge about these systems, despite us knowing that some of these threats were on the horizon. So I think that's one of the reasons. The other one why that I would highlight, being a scientist myself and working within a research organization, is we've always known that, science is a global enterprise. It works best in collaborative networks. But I don't think we've necessarily been as good at that as we are now recognizing that we should be. We've still, despite recognizing that value of bringing minds together, have worked in silos. So either worked within your discipline or, within certain restricted networks or on short timelines, and have failed to always build the systems that support working across disciplines, for one, to really resolve problems in a holistic manner, but also to build collaborations and partnerships that last long enough that you can actually resolve a problem, or that allows for a complex set of actors beyond the research environment to participate in that process. So I think all of those elements drive a realization that collaboration is increasingly important in our world today.
Yeah, indeed. I'm an avid home gardener, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't have beds or flower beds or whatnot. I just plant on the ground and go with the flow. And I noticed that if I plant my tomatoes with basil, they do well. If I plant my
Mm-hmm.
tomatoes with garden egg or eggplants, they don't quite do well. So I know that even as important as it is to collaborate, sometimes it can become overwhelming. There may be
Mm.
actors or two actors which are spoiling the soup, as they say, or killing the vibe. So how do you stay grounded and focused in your collaborative efforts from your own stories and from your own experiences, Ramona?
I think one key thing that has worked in my personal experience and in sort of successful examples of public-private partnerships, for example, that I've observed, or research policy collaborations, or even interdisciplinary research, right? Because biologists don't always speak the same language as economists, right? And we do
Mm.
need all of those as well to work together. I think is one, being very, very sort of clear from the beginning about the fact that we may have different goals. We may have different objectives. As an academic, I want to publish in a reputable journal. I want to have, a breakthrough in scientific discovery and sort of push the frontier. As a policymaker, I'm interested in showing impact, ideally quite quickly, improving the livelihoods of the farmers so they're not out onto the street protesting. And aligning subsidies with hopefully what is required on the ground and with global demands. As a private sector company, I have a shorter timeline usually, and I am interested absolutely in profit, but also making sure that I have a pipeline of customers in the future, right? Farmers are interested in getting a fair share, right? They get very little. They get 19 cents out of $1 usually on average, right? For what they produce. Maybe I'm interested in better access to market to remove some of the intermediaries. Interested in access to the latest technologies to finance, so I can improve, the equipment that I use on the farm, or monitor the soil quality and have better weather predictions, or know what to plant next to what, when, in what climates, right? Monitor the level of irrigation that is required and not give more water because it's expensive and counterproductive. So I think being clear about objectives, and sometimes when we get into a collaborative effort, spending a little bit more time at the beginning, setting up the framework and saying, okay, we're trying to achieve this together. We have different goals. We have maybe different timelines. We may speak slightly different languages as well. But here, right, on this goal, we are aligned. This is how we're going to do it. This is how we're going to monitor implementation and decide when we perhaps need to adapt or change tracks or revisit something. And finally, I think not let the complexity overwhelm us. I think Jane Goodall in the famous interview that I saw with her, which was post-mortem on Netflix, she said something about, yes, saving the planet is very complex and overwhelming. But if we all start, right, we don't let that deter us. We start, we do a little bit. We plant 100 trees somewhere. Or we make a convincing case for government to reorient some of its subsidies, or a change in policy, or 2,000 farmers having access to insurance or a new technology or finance. Get started and not let the complexity of it overwhelm us, I think, is what I would like to leave us all with.
Yeah, that resonates a lot with one of the terms that a lot of the Gen Z youth in Ghana are using right now. Whenever they face a problem, they're like, we move, right? So just keep moving, as murky as a collaboration can seem. So Bernard, how do you stay grounded and focused?
Yeah, I think onto that, I think that the complexity is a real issue to deal with in building these collaborations. I mean, many of you that I've engaged with would know that I often say that I prefer the term partnership. Of course, everything starts with a collaborative agreement in a short term, but ultimately, I think if we really want to make change, we need to be moving towards partnership. So something that has deeper levels of trust, that has clear overlapping goals for the different partners that are involved, and that has a long-term perspective that is not over in the first 2-year funding cycle, and then we all move on to the next sort of goals, but really is looking to change the system, to address a particular issue, and recognizes that takes a long time to achieve. And in this context of the complexity that Ramona is talking about, I think it requires of all of us to really seriously reflect on our priorities. What are the things that we are willing to commit to for a lifetime? What are the things that we really willing to commit our lives to, and find the other actors that, share that particular vision. And for sure, none of us have, visions of the world that is not shared by many different actors. So find the others, be as willing to be a follower as you are, to beat your own drum, and to take the time to build the relationships with the individuals in whatever the organizations they are. I think it's important that we recognize that we ultimately collaborate and build partnerships and trust with individuals, not with organizations. And that takes time to do. Um, but that also requires that we prioritize within this really complex and increasingly complex world, because you can't do that with everybody, and you can't commit to sort of a lifetime of commitment, with all the different issues that are on the table. So I think it does start reflecting very critically, what it is that you're willing to commit to over a long period of time.
Yeah, I mean, you've already hit on some of the key things that we've been thinking through, or that um, come up through the conversation, the time that you need to commit. You've mentioned partnerships, and sometimes we don't even appreciate the differences, or the slight nuances between what a collaboration is and what a partnership is. So, Ramona, in your line of work and with your experience, how do you um, arrive at a partnership from a collaboration, or is it the other way around? Is it a partnership before a collaboration, or a collaboration before a partnership?
I was thinking about that as Bernard was speaking. So I think in my mind, partnership is more formal. I was also director of strategic partnerships at the Global Development Network. And very often that also tended to be, sort of measured in number of MOUs that we signed, right, with partner organizations, or we decided to implement a project together, right? There is sort of, I don't know, a formal framework that captures the partnership. I think that also perhaps, for example, if you have local partners, I think that may also increase the chances of local ownership and sustainability. So as Bernard was saying, beyond the 1 year or 2 year of the funding for the project, perhaps the partnership sort of lives on without the formal partnership anymore. But you've made some local actors come together. You've made a foundation and sort of a government and an NGO, Nestle work together, and that carries on. So I think there's absolute real value in partnerships and having that formal framework to them. Collaboration to me is almost easier, because we just want, if we agree that we want to collaborate, there is goodwill, there is openness, there is trust, and there is some element of that you're not going to steal my idea, or my approach, and go and pledge it elsewhere for funding, for example. So I think collaboration can occur more organically, perhaps. The timeline of it may vary. And I think so, in terms of the order, as you were asking, Lydia, I think collaboration sort of comes first, and the willingness to collaborate, and sometimes that turns into a more formal partnership. There's absolute value in both, and you're not always going to have MOUs, and sometimes you have MOUs that mean nothing, and nothing happens. We shook hands, we took photographs, we signed an MOU, we maybe even signed a contract, and it still doesn't do anything. It's not operationalized. So I'm not making a plea here just for all of us signing more MOUs as a measure and value of partnerships. But I think, yes, first there's the willingness to collaborate and the openness, finding actors that are aligned with us, at least at that moment in time, or, it may not be the mission of that organization, may not be aligned perfectly with the mission of my organization, but we find a bridge. We find one goal, one objective that at that particular moment in that particular country is aligned, and we work together. And that may lead sometimes to more formal partnerships, sometimes not. So
yeah, I mean, alignment is definitely key. And I like how you elaborated that you really need to spend a lot of time in that early phase, and that can become a long-term relationship. But Bernard, time is scarce.
Mm,
Trust is extremely fragile. I
mm,
mean, even in
mm, mm,
100-year-old institutions, trust
mm,
is
mm,
still a problem, has always been,
mm,
is still going to be.
mm,
Do you have
mm.
any stories to share with us where you've had to deal with collaborations where probably trust became an issue, or there was not enough time to develop the collaboration to the extent that would result in tangible outcomes?
Yeah, I mean, I've got two stories in mind, and I'm also noticing the comment that Johan de Graaf puts in the chat box here. Time is limited, but I think, and I was just in the last week reminded again, we have to take the time out. If we're going to build true collaborations leading into partnerships, we have to take the time. Last week, I had the opportunity to do field work in Ethiopia with a group. It's a new collaboration starting. It's going into a second phase. I have not been there as part of the field work, and that last week I could join the team and go out there. And our host, this particular moment that I'm reflecting on now, where we're standing at 3,000 meters, very high in the highlands in Ethiopia, and he's pointing that way, and he says, when I was a child, I was born here, and I would walk 7 kilometers down that road to this point, and here we would rest, and then we would walk another 7 kilometers down to a school as a young child, and I would stay there for the week, and on the weekend I would be walking back. And behind me is the center that I have convinced the university to build for, agricultural research. And it's a moment of connection with an individual where there's shared what they're building there in terms of the center. I can see connection with the institute where I am, resources that we can share and so forth. But if I had not been there, and I'm not, often also don't take enough time, but it was a reminder to me that I need to take the time to understand why some people would care about something like that, what that personal connection would be, that would allow this to grow or allow me to respond in a manner that could let this collaboration grow into a partnership going forward. I mean, I would you give one other story of sort of a reflection on. I am in the institute where I am. I'm part of a program called the Tree Protection Cooperative Program, and that program has gone for, I don't know, 35 or 36 years. It started with a crisis in the forest industry where they dealt with a particular disease. They needed to find somebody to help resolve it, so it started with a very specific thing. But people across companies there found each other to say, we have a common problem. It doesn't make sense to deal with separately. They created a structure, a cooperative, that recognized that they had information that needed to stay private, but there was some information that needed to be shared. And if I reflect now on 35, 36 years, I haven't been in the program for all of that time, but the amazing thing is that people have changed. The leadership of those things have changed over time. But the common vision that people have there been able to ultimately build into a structure. So people find each other, they find their common vision, but ultimately you do need to build those things into structure that would outlast you, when you're no longer there. And I have other stories, unfortunately, where, we've set off on, with 100 miles an hour with great visions, and where leaderships change and structures are not in place, and ultimately projects and programs and collaborations die because it was dependent on an individual. It wasn't built into resilient enough structures to outlast the individuals that understood the value of the original vision. So I'll withstand with those two stories.
Thank you so much, Bernard. And Ramona, let me just give you a moment to see if you also have a story to share with us about trust and in collaborations that you've been part of.
You're muted,
You're
Ramona.
muted, Ramona.
Yes, sorry. Yes, I have a couple actually I'd like to reflect on quickly. One is a very simple, something, again, putting all of us or putting our hat on as consumers. If I don't trust that the organic certification process is legit, I would not be willing to pay a premium for something that has that little label on it and it says it's organic certified, right? It comes with trust. It starts with trust. The farmer itself, if he or she doesn't think that if they start planting quinoa instead of maize, they will actually have access to market, place to sell it, better yields, better income per hectare, or planting trees, right, on their farm as well, or rotating crops, that all of that actually has benefits, or bringing and spending money on a drone, they won't do it, right? So I think some of it is demonstration effect, and that takes time. Some of it is what we put in place and the processes. But yes, trust is essential. And then, making sure that you showcase the impact, right? Because trust also builds over time. So I may be still slightly skeptical as I go into it. I was talking to the people from Bayer Crop Science, for example. So they have this fantastic program, well, it's a public-private partnerships, essentially, called Better Life Farming Alliance. And it's in partnership with the IFC, right, which is part of the World Bank Group, in partnership with many local sort of partners and governments, and Bayer itself. But it provides access for smallholder farmers to finance and insurance, market linkages, right? So sometimes these public-private partnerships also integrate the farmers into a value chain, which is great for them. Financial literacy training, whether it's agroeconomic kind of training or digital literacy. Of course, they want to impact 100 million farmers by 2030, but it's already working in, I think, 9 countries in Africa and Asia where they've started implementing it. I think, again, making sure that you have sort of realistic expectations and partners that bring to the table what you cannot, and being sort of very clear about the goals is essential. And at the same time, sort of, not waiting for, that used to happen a lot in research projects, right? But you kind of waited for the end of the project to show, right? You publish your report, and then you may also do a roundtable with policymakers. And you kind of lost all of that time in between. But it's the same here. So sort of as you go along, and there may be learning, there may be also something that didn't work as well as expected, and you learn from it and you adapt it. Sort of reflecting on that and using it in how you communicate about this partnership, this collaboration, builds trust. Again, it may be more time consuming, and then to go back to the Global Development Network time, sometimes, again, when setting up a research program, we took time at the beginning to have something called a policy lab, where we finalized in each country the particular research questions, approach, methodology, with policymakers around the table and other policy actors, so that they're not treated as just sort of recipients at the end of our policy recommendations after 2 years of a brilliant and solid research. Because they understood, for example, sometimes there are sensitive areas of governance, public finance, whatever, but because they understood the value of it, what they will get out of it, right? Policy simulations, for example, they were also more willing to share data, which helped the researchers, right? And so it can be absolutely a win-win, and the value of it is enhanced if we build on that trust all along. Yeah.
Well, Thank you both for sharing these very, very rich insights. I mean, if you take a look at the chat, there are so many quotable quotes already emerging and so many questions that people are also hoping to explore. Um, I think it's a ripe time for us to go into breakouts now, where we will continue this conversation. We've been stimulated now by Bernard and Ramona. And we would like to invite you to um, briefly, first in your breakouts, introduce yourself, as Maggie would say, in one breath. So when you take in one breath, you can use that to introduce yourself. However, would also like to invite you, if you want to stay connected more, to just pop your email in the chat, and we would make sure that that happens later. So please would like to invite you into breakout. When you get there, briefly introduce yourself in that one breath. And then would like to invite you to share and discuss your reactions on what you've heard from Bernard and Ramona, and how that either is something new that you never had heard before or something that you'd hopefully want to build on. So Vince will give us 15 minutes in random breakouts, and yeah, have fun.
Perfect. I'm just going to invite everyone now. If anyone has any problems during this breakouts for the next kind of 10-15 minutes, just jump back here into plenary and I'll put you back in. But with that, I'm just going to make sure that all of the rooms are equal and we're good. Perfect. We'll see you very shortly. Here we go.
Bruce.
Here we come. Here we come. Here we come. Wonderful. I think everyone is back from their breakout rooms, and I can only imagine the conversations that you had while she were there. And yeah, this is the time to share any insights that you might have come across or aha moments. And so yeah, if you want to share, please, the time is here and now.
I'll start. We had an interesting conversation about, and I wouldn't say this frames it well, but it was the contrast between understanding the motivations of all the parties in the group as a starting point or as the ultimate criteria for a good collaboration, or having similar values and culture, and how much easier that makes it as well. And I can understand your motivation, but if we operate in completely different ways, we may never be able to collaborate, even if our motivations are aligned. So we that was one of the themes, and maybe a polarity that surfaced for us.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you for sharing that. Any other insight that we want to share?
I mean, I found, and I'll speak for Bruce, and I'd love to hear more from him about it, but he was telling us about the CLARE program and the collaboration IDRC was going through with UKFCDO, and both the good thing and the challenges that come from working with two different institutions. And I think he went back to the idea of we have a common goal, we have different ways of working, and how do we find a path for us to collaborate together? But I want to speak more for you, Bruce. I found it really interesting.
Thank you, Vince. Thank you for sharing that. If you'd rather chat as well, we are happy to receive your insights on the chat. But yeah, any other insights?
Resonating with me was something that Bernard was talking about, how you can create all this remarkable collaboration, but if you don't put the structure in place for it to continue on its own, when the originals move on to other things, how important that is, and how, it's complex to collaborate. It's even more complex to figure out how to plan for future collaboration, and how important that is to be authentic as a collaboration.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, when I think about since we are on the topic of agriculture, when I think about something that I learned way back in school about grafting. So grafting is one of the processes where you take part of a little twig from one plant and try and marry it to another plant, which is already well established, so that you have two or three different types of fruit from the same plant. And it's a fine collaboration that has to ensue before that marriage actually bears fruits. And it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of patience, it takes finding the right actors. And all of these things are themes which both Ramona and Bernard brought in their provocations. And really, that's what I think I'm taking away, that we have to commit to that time. We have to make sure that we are putting that time out, so that we can see beautiful fruits at the end of whatever collaboration that we are in. I like what Emma has written, that it's a testament to reciprocity in leadership. And yeah, your gift is a gift that can be given to someone else. Absolutely beautiful.
Can I
Okay.
come in?
Yes, please, Ramona.
I mean, I was just going to reflect on what we were talking about in our breakout, which is in fact looking at the overall multilateral system out there, which is under severe strain at the moment, and collaboration and cooperation globally is declining. And in some sectors, it is crashing, like peace and security, for example. But in some areas, including climate, which relates somewhat to agriculture, as I was saying at the start, and in technology, it is increasing, but it's not the large multilateral structures that are getting us there. It's smaller, more agile, fit for purpose, purpose-driven coalitions, and they may not have to last forever, right? Or they may turn into something else. But I think we need to be open to that and maintain sort of a lookout for that, because we may not currently have the structures in place to address those goals, and the UN agencies are under reform and under pressure, and they're failing. So it is a challenging time globally, not just in agriculture, but overall. Trust in science. I don't know, we can go on and on, right? But there's so many things out there that are being tested. And yeah, so maybe having a smaller, more agile coalition, and maybe more manageable goals is actually the way to go. The other thing I'll say, and this is sort of a pitch, but having independent, neutral platforms that bring together different types of actors, I think, is essential, like Inclusive Innovation or the World Agriculture Forum, for that matter. The whole purpose is to bring together actors from different sectors. And kind of you eliminate the element of competition, and you eliminate some of the misalignment in values or goals, but you're kind of reflecting, sharing knowledge, and learning together, and hopefully helping the ultimate beneficiaries and all of us get to a better world, better health, better food on our tables, and better lives for the farmers.
Very well said, Ramona. Very well said. Bernard, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, I had an opportunity, so if there are others, I'll wait, but if not, I'll add a bit. Yeah, I think one of the things that sort of stands out for me from the conversation that I didn't specifically prepare as a thought beforehand is the issue of time. In a world that is moving increasingly fast, where agreement is a thumbs up click, and you move on to the next thing you're going to be agreeing with type of thing. And reflecting on my experience of last week, spending a week in the car, driving with colleagues through the Ethiopian landscape, and that sort of moment that I described really sort of reinforces an idea for me in the context of what we're discussing today, of how important it is for me to spend the time, to just make sure I spend the time with individuals, because Maggie, I agree. I mean, we agree on this structure. I mean, it's the point I'm making. I think those are incredibly important. But we talked about earlier as well, MOUs and the papers and the whatever. And ultimately, it's not those things that they are necessary, but it's people, that the trust lies between people. And that only can be built by spending time with other people. So it's a reminder to myself, I think, that I need to take the time to spend time with other people to build partnerships that matter.
Wow. Yep. I mean, we can't top that. No, not at all. That was really well said. Um, we've had a really lovely conversation, and just to be on time and to make sure that we don't run over, I just want to ask if you have any final words for us, Ramona and Bernard, on collaboration, and what does it look like finally, for you in the coming weeks, in the coming year? Last thing,
I mean, I
Ramona.
think, yes, I think all of us, we have made a very strong case about how collaboration is essential in this sector and beyond, in international development more broadly. And I think it can help not just build trust and long-lasting relationships, but improve efficiency, I don't know, lower transaction costs, improve livelihoods, right? Because we're talking about these farmers and their livelihoods ultimately. It can improve coherence among policies, because forget about the incoherence between local and global policies. Sometimes even in the same country, one ministry has its own objective, another ministry has its own objectives, and they don't work together, right? They pull in different directions. So I think this is, for me, a space that I really want to keep pursuing and investing in, to facilitate these conversations, to facilitate these partnerships, to bring together people that have knowledge with those who need it, people that have finance with those who need it, people that have the solutions and more, I don't know, climate resilient seeds or better fertilizers or solutions to save water, with
Yeah.
those who need it and those who can use it, and to do so across the globe. It's yeah, to me it resonates, with my heart as well. And as you said at the start,
Right.
I see it in my own little farm in Transylvania, and I see it on a global scale through my work. So it's something I'm
Thank you,
going to
Ramona.
be behind.
Thank you, Ramona. Bernard, final words?
Yeah, I think I've given my final word. That's sort of my final thought. But I'll connect it to, often when I talk with colleagues about collaborations and moving into partnerships, I talk about the fact that you need to calculate that you will give something up. You've got to, you can't be in a relationship without giving something up. So to make sure that you carefully select those where you're willing to give something up. And the thing that I'm taking out of here is time. So what are those things that I'm willing to give up some time for and invest some time in, so that I can build a meaningful partnership out of it. I'll withstand with that.
Thank you, Bernard. Thank you, Bernard. And thank you to everyone who gave time for today's conversation. This time will not go unpaid. This time has been well spent, and would like to invite you to the next episode in our series. I believe Emma or Vince will pop it in the chat. And please follow us on LinkedIn, to continue getting these kind of inspirational provocations from all the people that we interact with. Our next conversation will be on March 11th, same time. So please make the time for us, and we'll share the details with you on our LinkedIn and also in the chat. Finally, we would absolutely love to hear from you and your reflections from today's series. Would like to hear what resonated with you. Would like to know what you want to see more of. tell us what will make the next episode even better. Maybe you have a recommendation of a topic or a theme that you think we can divulge into, which all focus on conversations at the edge. Yeah. There's a link in the chat that has where you need to go to give us your feedback. We really will appreciate it. I will appreciate it. And thank you so much for spending your hour with us. And we do wish you a wonderful rest of the day or evening or morning, and hopefully see you on March 11th. Bye.
Bye,
Thanks,
everybody.
Thanks,
Thank you
everybody.
very much.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Bernard.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
Ramona.